So I had to decide if I wanted to watch Barbie or Oppenheimer today, and I decided to watch the movie that was going to have a higher opening weekend at the box office because it would lead to the most potential for views on this review. So that is why me, a grown man by myself, purchased a ticket for Barbie. And I wasn't by myself. I was surrounded by women and small girls dressed in pink. And you know what? We had a pretty good time. I mean, the Barbie movie was honestly pretty good. I avoided most of the trailers for this, so I wasn't really sure what the movie was gonna even be about. And I was pretty pleasantly surprised. In this age of intellectual properties and people making money, making movies out of literally everything, whether it be emojis or the Super Mario Brothers movie, this movie honestly stands out as actually taking Barbie and kind of doing something interesting, right? This is a movie that doesn't feel as soulless as it could have felt, right? It actually has something to say about Barbie and about the impact that Barbie has had on our culture for better and for worse. I'm honestly kind of surprised that like Mattel was okay with this, with everything that this movie does and has to say about Barbie. I was just very fascinated that this movie even exists. But I guess to talk about the movie itself, right? The set design I think is a big highlight for me. I think that the way all the costumes and the world of Barbie is done, and the way that they sort of portray what sort of dolls, yeah, how they interact with things, like they're like drinking stuff but liquid isn't coming out, and they all have like arched feet because like a Barbie has just sort of the arched foot like you kind of see in the trailers where she's like stepping out of her heels. Oh, there's just a ton of interesting stuff that they do in the movie that I just thought it was very creatively shot, and executed. I think the performances are all really good. Margot Robbie is obviously perfect as Barbie, but Ryan Gosling as Ken is probably the highlight for me. He's really entertaining. He's really funny. And then there are a bunch of other actresses playing Barbie and a bunch of other actors playing Ken, and they're all good as well. I will say, I don't know if this movie is particularly kid friendly because it's not that there's necessarily a bunch of inappropriate stuff in it. I mean, there are some jokes that are aimed at adults, but for the most part, they're very much like couched in nondescript language so that, the jokes are going to fly over kids' heads. The movie also just deals with very adult themes and very existential stuff about what is your purpose in this world, and, just characters going through like existential crises, and it's like I don't know if kids are gonna like really grab onto this. You know what I mean? And it's like that's kind of the focal point of the movie because it's not like a Pixar movie, which is pretty much always doing stuff to entertain kids. I don't know if this movie does that. Again, it's just very interesting that this movie exists, that it was able to just be executed in the way that it was, to where it feels like a real movie, like with a real vision. And it's like I would have never expected a Barbie movie to feel like that. And that's pretty cool. And I will also say, if woke is a regular part of your vernacular, you are not going to like this movie. Straight up. You will hate it, right? If hearing the word patriarchy triggers you. They say it a lot in the movie, and it's probably going to upset you. But honestly, when it comes to sort of is the movie too woke or whatever, I actually do think that the movie has it approaches the conversation that it's wanting to have in a pretty interesting way. So let me actually take this moment and issue a spoiler warning. I'm going to sort of get into the message of the movie and what I think it's trying to say, and why I predict that the conversation around it is going to completely miss the point, and people on ideological sides are just going to take whatever they want to sort of run with whatever agenda they have. So let's get into that. Spoiler warning, leave if you haven't seen the movie. Okay. So what I feel like the movie is ultimately trying to do is sort of talk about how modern day feminism is kind of the other side of the coin of the patriarchy and of toxic masculinity. Because the interesting thing is that about the movie is that the Kens in the movie sort of go through, or they enact their own feminist movement. Because whereas in the real world, right, as it's portrayed in the movie, you have your patriarchy, in the Barbie world you have your matriarchy. And when you see the Kens sort of enact their feminism, that's not really the proper solution, right? Like that's not necessarily good either, right? And we're kind of seeing that a bit, in my opinion, in the real world, where like you're seeing like modern feminism to certain degrees lift up women and at the same time feel like you need to tear down men. And I do feel like the movie is, funnily enough, kind of critiquing that in a way. It even goes beyond gender norms. Like, I know, like, for me at least, I feel like there's this really weird sentiment going around when it comes to, like, race, where it's like, we really need to build up minority groups, and we also have to tear down white people at the same time. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I felt, I don't know, I feel like this weird, like, anti-white sentiment bubbling up, at least on social media. Maybe it's not too much in the real world, but on social media, it kind of feels like that. And I do feel like the Barbie movie kind of tackles those ideas of, yes, is sort of the patriarchy bad? And is the matriarchy in the Barbie world bad? Yes. But the answer here shouldn't necessarily be to just completely do the same thing, but the opposite, right? And I do feel like it also kind of goes into this whole thing of toxic masculinity, right? Or toxic femininity, where Barbie, in its sort of efforts to push the feminist agenda forward and be like, hey, girls can be doctors or lawyers or, I don't know, gynecologists. I don't know. Is there a gynecologist Barbie? Probably not. In this effort of sort of trying to like push girls into being these things, to a certain extent, it's kind of put these like undue pressures on women and this feeling that women need to be perfect. And I do kind of like that whole idea of toxic femininity also being a real thing, right? Where women need to look perfect, they need to be perfect, they need to be overachievers, they need to have careers now in the real world, but they also still need to keep their femininity, right? If they're too career driven, if they're too sort of confident, then that can also be a negative in today's society. And I thought that it explores all of these themes in a really interesting way. And I like that at the end of the day, I think the ultimate message of the movie is that wanting to be all of these things and wanting to have goals and dreams and whatnot, none of that is bad. And acknowledging that there are or have been certain structures put in place to keep, oppressed, keep women down. Like, it's fine to acknowledge all of that, but you don't need to tear down the other side in your efforts of acknowledging that, or in your efforts of following your dreams. But it's also okay to just be a regular person. You don't have to be a perfect Barbie, You can just live a regular life, which is obviously what Margot Robbie's Barbie decides to do at the end of the movie, and that's totally cool. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like, and this is just my prediction, but the discourse surrounding this movie is going to be terrible. You're going to have your, like, anti-woke people, like the Critical Drinker or whatever, like Geeks and Gamers. They're going to be big mad because they're going to come out of the movie and they're going to be like, they had to tear down Ken in order to raise up Barbie, and the movie, it just talks about how the patriarchy is bad and men are bad and blah, 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 blah. And then I'm sure you're going to have people on the left that are going to they're going to take the movie and be the straw men that, like the anti-woke people sort of bring up when, I don't know, I feel like the movie is a lot more nuanced than what people are going to give it credit for. Or I don't know. That's just my interpretation. Maybe I'm off base. You know what I mean? Who knows? I'm an idiot. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.